Good morning! Welcome to Kerbal Space Program. Uh, Today I'm going to be reenacting or simulating the SpaceX and NASA mission that will happen this afternoon to send the Dragon 2 crew capsule to the International Space Station. So let's get started. After watching the aborted launch on Wednesday, I thought it would be fun to recreate this in Kerbal Space Program just in case we don't get to see a launch today. So I put together, I'm using just stock Kerbal Space Program, and just put together the Falcon 9 and Dragon capsules. And I also built the International Space Station up in low Kerbin orbit. So let me show you the rocket first. So here's my Dragon 2 crew rocket. It's the SpaceX's Dragon 2, or their Falcon 9 is a two-stage rocket, powered by 9 Merlin motors, which the Merlin rocket engines, which KSP doesn't have. Instead, I'm using the KS-25 Vector engines, and I built this rocket with 9 of them originally, and it was so much thrust to weight ratio that it was basically uncontrollable. So I reduced it to 5. So mine isn't really a Falcon 9 rocket, it's a Falcon 5 rocket. And then in the second stage, I've got a single Reliant engine, I believe is what I have in there. Yeah. And then the final stage is there's no liquid fueled rockets. It's just the Dragon crew capsule itself detaches right here, and it is powered by just monopropellant thrusters, which will navigate to and dock with the International Space Station, as well as deorbit, and then the payload part of it here detaches, and just the capsule will do re-entry back into Kerbin atmosphere. Now let me show you so I didn't have a space station in my Kerbal Space Program save, so I quickly put one together. So this is the Kerbal National Space Station that we will be docking with here in a minute. I wanted to simulate the kind of NASA and their mission parameters as best I could, so I put this space station in orbit similarly to how the actual International Space Station is in orbit as far as its orbital period goes. So it will make one complete orbit around Kerbin every 90 minutes, which is roughly what the real International Space Station does. It's in a almost equatorial orbit, except I think I've got like maybe 3 degrees of inclination or something. So we'll have to do an inclination correction burn once we get up into low Kerbin orbit. And then we will basically, we're going to take off with the International Space Station more or less directly overhead. And we'll have this big parabolic orbit, which we will, once we get up to about 780 kilometers, we will burn to circularize, and then we'll do one lap around, and we'll be pretty close to where the space station is. We'll do our inclination correction, and then we will dock with the space station. Then they're going to chill out up there for, I think, this actual mission, I think they're supposed to be up there for like 30 days or something, and then they'll go back down. We will let them do their experiments or whatever in an abbreviated time window before we head back down. So let's go back to the Space Center and let's get this rocket launched. Okay, I think I've already got the rocket on the launch pad. Yes. So inside the rocket, just like today or this afternoon's mission, we've got two brave um, pilots, or we've got Jeb and we've got an engineer, Bill Kerman, who are sitting up inside the uh, capsule on the nose of the rocket. So let's check where we're at. It's a little bit advanced in our orbit. Let's just go ahead and we'll use time warp. We kind of want to wait for them to be directly overhead. Um, that way, as we are getting into the atmosphere and getting into low carbon orbit, we will hopefully meet them, you know, and not have to waste a bunch of time, doing revolutions around Kerbin. So now I guess we're gonna have a night launch. That's fun. So let's check everything. We're gonna turn on our guidance. We're going to pull down the throttle a little bit because, like I said, this has a lot of thrust. Gonna make a quick save just in case everything goes sideways. But I think we're about ready. So there's a view inside the capsule. Let's just check all the instruments, make sure everything's okay. Say what's up to Bill. And I think we are just about ready to go. So it seems like we've got a nice slow launch, and that's on purpose. We want to kind of slowly build speed until we get to the thin part of the atmosphere. So right here at sea level, the atmosphere is very thick, and if we get going too fast right away, we will have to overcome a bunch of aerodynamic forces that will waste fuel. So we kind of want to build our velocity slowly until we get up to the thin part of the atmosphere, which is here on the altimeter. And when that happens, we can start to do our gravity turn, and we can start to increase our throttle a little bit. So now we're kind of getting into that zone. I'm going to start to slowly do my gravity turn here. Start to ease up on the throttle, or put the foot down a little bit, and we're going to try and angle ourselves over. So right now we mainly got vertical velocity, vertical momentum. We want to start angling over to build up some lateral speed as well, which is what's going to actually make our orbit or our trajectory stay on the heading. So this green thing is our prograde vector. That's the actual direction that our ship is going. And then and now we're ready to do our stage separation. This is our first stage. It's going to fall off behind us, and once it's clear, I'm going to go ahead and start up the next stage, and we can go ahead and go full throttle here. Now that we're pretty much out of the atmosphere, we don't have to contend with any of the atmospheric forces. We can go right up to full throttle. And our first stage is going to fall back down. In the SpaceX mission, they are going to recover that first stage. It's going to do an autonomous landing. But I am not going to simulate that here today. I thought that would be a little bit maybe too much to too ambitious. But let's go ahead and check what our orbit is, and you can see that our apoapse is getting right out to the sweet spot where we want it to be. We want it to be right at 780. So I'm going to ease up just a little bit more. Stop. So now our highest point in our orbit, our apoapsis, is right where we want it to be, 780 kilometers. And then once we get here, we're going to burn prograde, which will circularize our orbit. So right now we would just crash right back into Kerbin. So we want to add velocity here, which will bring up our orbit so that it's circular. We also want to go ahead and add the Kerbal National Space Station as our target, and when we do that, you can see our target indicators here. So I'm going to undo this maneuver here so you can see. If we just kind of let it rock, the closest we were going to get is right here when we're at apoapsis. The space station is going to be here, and we would be right here. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up, add some velocity, and you can see that those two indicators are getting closer and closer. That's what we want. As I bring it up to where we're just about circularized, so you can see we got 780 as our highest point, 759 as our lowest. I'm going to go ahead and continue to bring up so that we want them both to be about the same number. That means we're circular. And as we do, there we go. We've got a pretty good separation here. It's not ideal. It's currently at 76 kilometers, so we're going to do some additional tweaking of our orbit here to try and bring those a little bit closer together. So I'm gonna so that's increasing it. We want to, well, how about we just leave it as it is? And I think the reason why we're so far apart, if I zoom down in here, it's because of our inclination. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and circularize like we planned, and then at the ascending node of our two orbits, you can see how separated they are here. I'll do my inclination burn, and then that should bring this number back down to a much more reasonable level. So we've got our next maneuver set up. You can see here our ship is just kind of chilling. The pilots are happy. We are currently about 300 kilometers above the surface, so I'm just going to warp to our next maneuver. You can see the KSS is, we're about to meet up with it. We're pretty close to it, but our velocities are very different because I haven't circularized my orbit yet. And you always want to do maneuvers at your apoapsis or periapsis to be the most efficient way to change your orbits. Okay, gonna go ahead and use my whatever this is called, computer-aided maneuvering to point at the vector of the node we just set up here. And then it says we've got an 18-second burn time. We start that burn in 20 seconds. So let's take another little quick peek here. You can see the surface of Kerbin down there below us. We've got the sun. You can see the Milky Way. Start our burn in 2 seconds. And this is the delta V that we need to complete the maneuver. As we are burning, you can see that our orbit is changing gradually. So we're almost there. I'm going to throttle down a little bit so we don't overshoot. And once this reaches 0, we can cut the engines. I think we can do a little better than that. There we go. So now the next thing we need to do, we're pretty close to the space station here. It looks like, what is our separation here? Oops. Can you show me this, please? We are at, but like I said, about 3 degrees difference between our orbits, and we're at about 78 kilometers separation between the two. And here we're at about 64. So I'm going to go ahead and correct our inclination here. So what I'm doing is, this is the plane that we're currently on. This is the plane, this light yellow line, that the space station is on. So I am going to just adjust this. I'm going to burn anti-normal and bring our planes back to where I am coplanar with the space station. And you should be able to see the ascending node. There it is. It's at 0.4 degrees. Can you stay up there? There we go. We want that to be 0. Whoop. Went too far off the screen. 3, 2.1 and 0. Now we should be perfectly coplanar. Right there. So we're going to go ahead and do similarly, I'm going to warp to that next node that I just set up. Got plenty of fuel in the tanks to do all these maneuvers in our second stage. I'm going to use the nav computer to point to that node that I just set up. And we'll time warp a little bit so that we don't have to wait the full 50 seconds. Now this is a very short burn, only 2 seconds, so I'm not going to go full throttle. I'm just going to nudge the throttle a little bit, so again, we don't overshoot our goal. You can see that the orbit is syncing up with the space station. And that's just about right. Okay, so now what we need to do is, let's see, this is pretty close, 75 kilometers. What we really need to do is we need to catch up to the space station. So right now we're going almost the exact same speed as the space station, and we're on the same orbit with the space station. So we'll never catch up with them since they're just a little bit ahead of us. So what we want to do is I'm going to just slightly alter my orbit so that I'm moving a little bit faster than the space station. And kind of counterintuitively, to do that, I'm going to burn retrograde, which means I'm actually going to take some speed out of the orbit. Oh, that's retrograde to the target. I meant to do retrograde to my orbit. So this will bring in our periaps. And what you can see here, we'll go one lap around, and in doing that, let's go back a little bit. I think we overshot it. You can see the separation is now 27 kilometers. So we're going slightly faster than the space station, and after one full revolution around, we took that 78 kilometers difference that we were, and we reduced it all the way to 27 and a half. So now I'm just gonna see if I can't just get that a little closer. Yeah, so we're getting pretty close. That's 600 meters, so that is exactly what we want. So we're going a little faster than them. When we get here, our relative velocity is going to be, you know, something that we're going to have to cut out. But you should see, I'm going to go ahead and warp to here. We should slowly be catching up to the space station. And as predicted, we are. So now, where is the space station? There it is, right there. That's our target. I can highlight the target here. So now we are very, very close to him. That's terrific. We want to now set our nav ball so that all of these the nodes and things you see here on the nav ball are in relation to the target itself. So me burning retrograde is no longer me burning retrograde to my orbit. I'm burning retrograde to the target, so that means I'm taking out all of the relative velocity I have to the target. So now we are, in fact, moving the exact same speed as the target. Now we have to get rid of some of this separation, but at this point, I need the extra maneuverability of our monopropellant, and our second stage has served its purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and detach our second stage, and now we are just left with the Dragon capsule itself. So too much mech Jev, he says. I'm not using mech Jev. This is actually just using all stock, not using any mods. But I'll take that as a compliment. So now we've got our this pink thing is the target. Let's go ahead and I've switched on RCS, so that means that we can now control the ship. We can translate the ship instead of just pointing the nose like you would a traditional rocket. So now on my prograde vector, this green thing is pointed directly in line with the pink thing, which is our target. So now when I burn towards the target, we are now, the prograde vector means we're moving at the target at 2 meters per second. So you can see that the distance to the target is closing. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the lights. So I put some lights on the front of the ship so we can see what we're getting into here. And I'm just going to time warp a little bit I don't want to approach the target at some insanely fast speed and have to cut a bunch of speed. So we're going a very modest, about 2 meters per second, and I'll just time warp to get us there. So far the mission has gone for about 2 hours, which is pretty good. We haven't had to waste a bunch of time orbiting the planet a bunch of times to cut out. So now we need to pick where we're going to dock. So I'm going to just real quickly cut off some of our relative. Oh, that is the wrong button. Relative speed. So now we should be pretty much just matched with speed. So this will, now I have a little bit of time to figure out where we want to dock. So I don't know where the, I'm going to go ahead and control from here. I'm going to open the shield. So this is our docking port. And then I'm going to set the target to one of the mini docking ports on the International Space Station here. So why don't we dock, if we want to dock right on the nose of it, or we could dock, there's a whole bunch of places that I set up where we could possibly dock. So why don't we go right in the middle of the ship. We're going to set that as our target. So now if we point our ship at the target, it will be pointing here instead of just kind of, the default is kind of just to point it at the center of mass of the thing. So now we're actually pointed at the docking port. So I'm going to do a couple of monopropellant puffs to get us over that direction. And I'm at a time warp again. And now I'm going to cut our speed because we need to orient ourselves properly to the target. So now I'm just going to do stable flight. And what we need to do is get us in line with how we will eventually be docked, which will be perpendicular to this main section here. And then I'm going to use our ability of RCS to laterally maneuver, and I'm just going to move us up, down, left, right, until we're right in line with where we need to dock. The best way to do this is very slowly. If you get too aggressive here, it's very easy to crash into the ship, and in Kerbal Space Program that's not a big deal, but as you can imagine in real life it would be. So basically our, ooh boy, I keep moving my mouse off the screen and that's messing things up. We're very close now. So I am going to turn off RCS real quick, so that we're just pointing at the ship. Instead of using thrusters, we've got these gyroscopic things that let us steer our ship. And that's because I didn't want to introduce any additional forces. So now we're pretty much lined up with where we want to be. I've got the target set so that we'll always be pointing at the target, and we're just going to very slowly approach. Turn off RCS. And these docking ports are magnetic, so when we get very close to one another, they will kind of automatically attach to one another, and then we will be docked. Everything's going smoothly so far. Jeb is happy, Bill is happy, they're kind of waving their hands, and we are docked. So now our Dragon capsule is docked with the ISS, or the KSS in this case. What we're going to do is we're going to, we could do a little EVA. So Jeb is now doing a space flight around the ship, and we can turn his lights on too so he can see what he's doing, and we'll just kind of, he's just checking to make sure that, you know, he didn't sustain any damage in flight, you know, checking over the capsule and saying, okay, yeah, everything's good. I don't see, we didn't take any atmospheric damage when we made our escape from Kerbin, so he's happy. We're going to put Jeb back in, and then we're going to transfer Bill over because Bill has a bunch of science and engineering to do up in space. So we're going to leave him here, and then we're going to take the Dragon, Jeb's going to take the Dragon capsule back home, and we will splash down and end our mission. So he needs to get close to the ship. And he can grab onto the ladder once he gets close enough. And then he can climb back in the hatch. So Jeb is now back on board the Dragon capsule. And now we are going to transfer crew. We're going to transfer Bill, and Bill has some science to do. So he's going to go and do his engineering experiments in this. Oh, I didn't mean to do an EVA. I meant to do view. So now he's inside this module where he's able to run all of his experiments and do his groundbreaking work on the space station. Oh, we got a little wobble introduced from something. Let's avoid the Kraken. Alright, so now what we want to do is we're going to be doing our re-entry burn, and when we do, we're going to be burning retrograde, which will bring in our periapsis. So we want to do that on the dark side of the planet, so that we actually make our re-entry on the light side of the planet. So I'm going to warp us over here. Then when we do our re-entry, we'll try and be pretty close to the space station, to the to mission control, the space center. So when I do our re-entry burn, we'll be on the complete opposite side of the planet. Alright, and we should be good now. So Jeb is going to say goodbye to Bill and, wish him luck, and take whatever cargo that he needs to bring from the International Space Station back down to Kerbin. And when they've said their goodbyes, we can undock the Dragon capsule. And now we're back in control here with Jeb. So we're going to turn back on our computer guidance, our RCS, and we need to pick a target real quick. And we are now going to slowly detach from the space station. We're going to go ahead and close our docking shield. And then I'm going to translate us laterally, so that when we do our re-entry burn, we do not... can I unset this target? No, I cannot. We don't crash back into the space station on accident. That would be very embarrassing for Jeb. Go ahead and turn off the lights. Okay, so now we have orbit selected on our nav ball, so all of these indicators will be in relation to our orbit. We're going to pick our prograde vector. So now we are pointing in the opposite direction of our orbit. And when we are ready, we are going to begin leaving the space station behind. And as we do this long burn, you can see our periapsis is dropping. You can also see that down here in the orbit view of your reticle, of your UI, I should say. I'm pretty sure the Kerbal Space, yeah, I can just set that as our target. So we've just got these monopropellant jets. I believe the real Dragon capsule might actually have liquid rockets at this point, but I didn't know for sure. So this is one of the gray areas of this mission where I wasn't sure if they were using monopropellant for this part or they were actually using liquid engines. And we can check check our fuel levels here. We got plenty of monopropellant left. I kind of over-engineered this aspect of it because I wasn't sure how long this burn was going to take. And you can see our periapsis is slowly but surely falling. Check on Jeb, he's just monitoring all the instruments. You know, everything seems fine, no flashing red lights. We've got good communication with the space station and with the Kerbal Space Center. Keeping an eye on our orbital velocity. Jeb is just thrilled. He loves space. He loves flying. He loves risking his life for science. I cannot accelerate through this, or I would. There are certain mods that you can install that let you do physics acceleration while you're using thrust, but I do not have any mods installed. This is purely stock, so we have to sit and wait. I guess if I lose the nav ball, I can't use RCS. That's good to know. So Kerbin's atmosphere starts at 70 kilometers. So we're currently, our periapsis is 380-ish. If we get that down to 70, we will start hitting the thin part of the atmosphere, and that's technically where we can start doing aerobraking. However, we'll be going so fast, we will generate a lot of heat that will not dissipate very quickly, and we may just skip off the atmosphere and have to do a whole bunch of aerobraking maneuvers, or we could burn up. So what we're going to do, also kind of counterintuitively, we want to dip our periapsis down to about 35 kilometers, which is starting to get into the thicker part of the atmosphere. So we will generate a lot of heat at first, but the thick atmosphere will slow us down a lot more effectively, and as we slow down, we'll stop generating as much heat, and that will allow us to safely re-enter the atmosphere. The Dragon capsule has, after it separates, so the separation will occur right here. There's this big monopropellant tank here, and then I've also got a big ablative shield here. So if that monopropellant tank were to burn up, we've still got a big heat shield on the capsule that we can safely re-enter with. But I don't anticipate that happening. And then when we get down close to the ground, we have 4 parachutes that will open up, and we will safely glide down to the surface. Now I'm gonna kind of just hope that I'm gonna put us right here, and I'm gonna try and aim us so that we land in the ocean, just here close to the Kerbal Space Center, because easily they can just send a little boat out and pick us up in a couple of hours, and they won't have to send out a search party across the whole globe to find us. That being said, I'm not very good at planning my re-entries, so I expect us to land anywhere along this line. But still, we might land on the land, we might land in the water. I'm going to try and land us in the water, but, we'll see. I've got some satellites that are in orbit, in low Kerbin orbit here. Some communications satellites, your DirecTV, your Sirius XM, that's here, as well as some top secret spy satellites we can't talk about here on the stream. So we're getting pretty close. We're now almost technically into the highest part of the atmosphere. And now we can do aerobraking at this point, but like I said, we want to aim for a little thicker part of the atmosphere. anywhere in here. 45, that would be pretty good. I like to just go a little bit lower. And there we go. So our periapsis is now in the kind of middle part of the atmosphere, where we will get very efficient aerobraking, and we will safely land. So yeah, so we should be landing. I'm gonna guess we land right here in the ocean. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. We'll see how well that goes. So now we've done all we need here. We can actually detach this part. It will just crash to the ground harmlessly, and this is our re-entry vehicle. So now we can, since I'm not using thrust anymore, we can time warp. We're still back here on the dark side of the planet. We're leaving the space station, as you can see, and we'll just do some time acceleration. See, I always, don't take into account the actual rotation of the planet. So I'm going to point retrograde because that's where the heat's going to be coming from. We want all the heat to hit the back part of the vessel here, not the actual capsule. And now we are in the atmosphere. So now this is physical time acceleration, where the actual physics and aerodynamics will take effect. And will slow us down. We're generating a lot of heat here. We're in the upper part of the atmosphere. We're going 2,600 meters per second. Pretty quick, generating a lot of heat. But you'll quickly see that the atmosphere will start to quickly slow us down. Kind of over this desert peninsula here before we get to the continent that the Kerbal Space Center is on. It should be right over here on the horizon. And as you can see, our monopropellant tank is starting to heat up. It's not quite at critical levels yet, but it's getting close. And we're still dipping further and further into the atmosphere. You can see our orbit will become more and more and more parabolic. Something just exploded. No. Just bad noises. Turn off our RCS for now. Yeah, our little air our ducts here are heating up. That is strictly for cosmetic purposes. I wanted it to look something like the actual Dragon capsule. They don't actually do anything. I think that might be our the bottom part of the stage that we jettisoned a minute ago. And we're just really dropping a lot of velocity very quickly now. Once again, Jeb's just chilling. You can see all the flames out his little windows here. But, as always, Jeb's a trooper. Smile on his face. He's not scared. And now we're approaching the continent where the Kerbal Space Center is. We've lost a lot of our velocity. Our monopropellant tank is no longer in danger of burning up. Now should have a very parabolic orbit, as you can see. Our trajectory is now ballistic. Or it was, I guess, ever since we cut off our thrusters. And we're just going to make a nice, easy approach. Speed up time a little bit here. We're going relatively slowly now. About Mach 1. But as we get to the lowest parts of the atmosphere, we'll slow way down. And at this point, we can go ahead and use our chutes. They will stay kind of in drogue mode until we get right at at sea level. They deploy. And now we just make a nice, easy descent to the surface. Easy peasy. We did make it almost back to the Kerbal Space Center. Just, you know, a few hundred miles. Nice, easy helicopter trip, and I'll go pick up Jeb, and he'll be safe and sound. And we're gonna have a nice light touchdown. Jeb can get out and oh, yeah, a little fall, it's fine. Jeb's a trooper. And he can even take his helmet off and stretch his legs. He's been up in space for, 30 days or whatever it was. And that's it. We can recover our vessel. Mission accomplished. I hope you enjoyed this. Y'all have a good afternoon, and we'll all watch the SpaceX mission later. Thanks for watching.